So good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to be sharing with you all some of the efforts that the agency has been undertaking to advance environmental justice and energy equity within the Department of Energy. My name is Kelly Crawford. I am a senior advisor for energy and environmental justice. I've been with the department for about a year. I come from state and local government. I was formerly the State Air Pollution Control Officer for the District of Columbia, so in that role I had permitting authority and also served as a president of the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, pretty much observing over the last 50 years just all these tremendous reductions that we've been having in improving air quality, but also noticing how those benefits were not falling to all Americans evenly, even within the District of Columbia. This led me to some research that I did with Millikan School of Public Health with Dr. Castillo, attributing public health impacts to air pollution and using satellite data to identify disparities within the District of Columbia. There was a case study that came out with this, and the overall impacts that we saw were that the areas in the district that were that had higher concentrations of Black residents also had higher incidence of morbidity and mortality associated with poor air pollution. And so that's kind of like how I came to my equity work and my equity practice. And since then, my career has evolved, and now I've joined the Department of Energy in this effort to institutionalize and operationalize environmental justice through our programs and services. And so just a snapshot of the Department of Energy is one of the largest federal agencies, huge amounts of funding, and is responsible for all of the technologies that will lead us to a clean energy economy. I work in the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, led by the Honorable Director Shalonda Baker, and the mission of ED is to ensure that that all Americans benefit from the prosperity of our energy economy. This office was actually started back in the 70s and has been working for decades on this work, but under this new administration we have revived resources and opportunity to really advance environmental justice. I think we're all very familiar with DOE's hydrogen program, but just to give a quick overview, DOE's hydrogen program is truly part of an interagency, broad portfolio of activities, and so we have multiple offices across DOE that are working together, and, led by the Hydrogen Fuel Technologies Office. Hydrogen is a key element of our Swiss Army knife of tools to decarbonize the economy. And so it's a really important part of how we conceptualizing advancing environmental justice, in that these clean energy technologies are exactly the tools that we need to remove harmful pollutants from the atmosphere by increasing their market share. And so the role of my office, the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, is to advise the Secretary on energy policy, to work on research around environmental justice and equity data, to develop and recommend policies and regulations for people of color, and accessing energy burdens, especially for minority communities, low-income communities, and people of color. And we also provide technical assistance to our programs. And so this is the challenge that we're faced with. How do we transition our energy system while it becomes more equitable and just, so that we're not advancing the harms of the past, but we're actually using this as an opportunity to repair those harms and ensure that all Americans can partake in this clean energy economy. So what do we know? We know that at present state, the outcomes from our energy systems are causing disproportionate impacts, especially on disadvantaged communities. We know that redlining continues to have an outsized impact on outcomes for folks today. We know that folks that are living in historically redlined areas experience disparate outcomes, from everything from access to health care to health outcomes, from access to credit, disinvestment in communities, and it also are the very same barriers that make it more difficult to advance clean energy objectives. We also know that Black and Latino communities experience the burdens of more pollution than what they are producing. And we also know that there are other aspects of climate change that also exacerbate the outcomes for communities of color. For example, we know that areas that have higher concentrations of minority populations have have lessened ability to be resilient from natural disasters, power outages, and some of the effects of climate change. Climate change exacerbates the existing inequities because those same communities that have been underinvested in also have lower resiliency for their energy systems. They have higher energy burden costs and all things that make it more difficult for them to recover from natural disasters or the effects of climate change. We also have, again, this legacy of the pollution from our energy systems that have pervasive public health outcomes that are disproportionately affecting communities that already are overburdened by a number of impacts, including energy poverty, lack of access to capital, lack of access to adequate medical care, and also housing stocks that exacerbate the impacts of outdoor air pollution and the other effects of the environmental effects of energy production systems. We also know that energy insecurity affects a broad section of the population. 1 in 3 households are affected by energy insecurity, and that means that there's a large part of the country that are making decisions on whether or not they can afford their energy bills, their utility bills, and being able to afford basic necessities. So we have an incredible opportunity to address some of these inequities by looking really closely at how energy burdens and public health are related. And what we have seen, and this is some research by my colleague, Dr. Tony Reams, that even with a small increase, a 1% increase in energy burden, that the results can be quite dramatic. We see an increase in premature death rates. We see a 7% increase in poor health outcomes, and also a decrease in the life expectancy. So this energy insecurity, all of these things kind of accumulate to dramatic impacts for disadvantaged communities who are very vulnerable to these impacts. And also, we are working to ensure that we can change the lived experiences of residents and communities when interacting with our energy systems. So why energy and environmental justice at the Department of Energy? There's 2 important things to keep in mind. 1, the inequitable impacts that I've already kind of gone over. We know that these impacts have not fallen evenly across the country. We know that there are certain communities that are more heavily impacted. We know that there are certain communities that have persistent poverty and other factors that exacerbate their ability to respond to changes in the energy system, to afford energy as a basic service, and also who are impacted disproportionately with the environmental impacts of energy systems. But then there's another imperative. We also have the scientific imperative that we know that by increasing the pool of minds, the chorus of voices that are working together to solve these solutions, that we actually get better scientific outcomes. And so we also have that scientific imperative to diversify the energy system to bring more people into the conversation and improve outcomes in that way. So in this administration, before this administration, but currently, we have several executive orders around this topic that we're working to advance. We have the most recent one, which is 14096, Rebuilding Our Nation's Commitment to Environmental Justice for All. And then also the Executive Order 14008, Climate and Home Abroad, which contains the Justice 40 initiative. And so these are the tenets of energy and environmental justice. They're based on a lot of different research. This is from, these are the 4 pillars: procedural, recognition, distributive, and restorative justice. These are all different approaches that we take to advance environmental justice and guide our actions in order to institutionalize it within the agency. The agency does have a long history with advancing environmental justice that does predate the Justice 40 initiative. Since 1994, 1995, the agency has produced an environmental justice strategic plan and implementation plan updates. The most recent one was released just couple of weeks ago. And in those reports, it really chronicles the agency's efforts over the years to advance environmental justice and illustrates the programs that have been developed to incorporate environmental justice across the agency. And we've been, I think we're on the second 5-year iteration of that plan. However, we have this concept of energy justice that's not addressed in that environmental justice plan. And energy justice is kind of is a broader look at all of the impacts of the energy system and bringing together those tenets of justice to them. And that includes the social and economic impacts of our energy system beyond just the environmental impacts. Sorry, it seems I'm missing a slide. Okay. So under this administration, the Biden administration has undertaken a whole host of climate goals, and most importantly, to achieve a net zero clean energy economy by 2050. And that work is largely led by the Department of Energy. And so what is Justice 40? Justice 40 is an initiative under which we are charged with ensuring that the benefits of all of these historic investments in climate change and clean energy, especially, that those benefits are driven directly to those disadvantaged communities who have been underserved, overburdened, and left out of the conversation. And those exact same communities that are experiencing those disproportionate impacts, those negative health impacts, and the energy burdens that are associated with our energy infrastructure. At the Department of Energy, our Justice 40 priorities are centered around how can we drive benefits to those communities and what do those benefits look like. So the benefits and the policy priorities that we're focused on are these here: decreasing energy burden within disadvantaged communities, decreasing environmental exposure in those communities, increasing parity in clean energy technology, increasing access to low-cost capital and opportunities for minority business enterprises and disadvantaged businesses, increasing the pipeline for clean energy jobs and including job training for individuals who are in disadvantaged communities, increasing energy resiliency within disadvantaged communities, and then also increasing energy democracy, including community ownership of energy systems. And for Justice 40, the White House defines disadvantaged communities using the White House Climate and Justice Screening Tool, the CJIS tool, which is available on the internet, and it covers over 30,000 census tracts of communities that are designated as disadvantaged that we are focused on driving all of these benefits to. So at the Department of Energy, we have over 140 covered programs. It does cover a large portion of our programs because clean energy is a large part of the mandate of the department. And so we have over 23 program offices that we're actively engaged with, helping to understand how to incorporate Justice 40, how to advance environmental justice, and how to institutionalize these concepts into program design and how we're delivering our funding. The most recent executive order, 14096, also re-ups the agency's commitment to advancing environmental justice in particular, and charges the agency with developing a new environmental justice strategic plan, which we will be developing soon, that is due next year, and also recommends this whole of government approach. And as such, we participate in a White House Interagency Council where we're constantly working with our federal partners on how we can advance environmental justice and learn from each other and support each other as we are trying to incorporate this into our everyday work, which for some of the agencies that are, have been drawn into this work by this newest executive order, there are many agencies that are on different places on the continuum of advancing environmental justice. One thing in particular to note from the newest executive order is that we have a federal definition of environmental justice that is slightly different from the well-socialized EPA version or EPA definition of environmental justice. And I'll just point out some key differences here is that in this new definition of environmental justice, it defines environmental justice as not just the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people, but also directly related to agency decision-making and other federal activities. Federal activities being broadly defined here as everything from funding to programming, enforcement, permitting, compliance, how we deliver our funding, and even how we manage our third-party contracts. In this newer definition, this updated definition, it also specifically draws attention to the impact of cumulative impacts and also the drivers of climate change as a subset of environmental justice. And so really both expanding the scope of the definition of environmental justice, but limiting it or confining focusing it on agency decision making and federal activities. And so we find ourselves at with a unique opportunity. We have both the funding and the mandate to really take huge strides on advancing environmental justice. We have more money devoted to this energy transition than ever before, and we have we have so many efforts going on in so many different parts of the government to really drive this mission forward. So this is a picture of Secretary Granholm and Director Baker, noting that justice is serving as the North Star for the agency. And so across the board, everywhere we can, we are working to institutionalize the principles of environmental justice and ensure that every part of the agency is doing what they can to advance these goals. And we have plenty of opportunity to do that. So with the bipartisan infrastructure law, this is bill at a glance, $62 billion. And of that $62 billion, we are charged with driving 40% of the benefits of these investments to those disadvantaged communities. So, you know, it's a huge amount of funding that's available to the department that we are actively getting out the door. And so we have a lot of different tools on how are we achieving this mission. Just to highlight for hydrogen, there's $9.5 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure law for hydrogen. And also, there's significant tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's also some funding in the CHIPS Act as well that are related to hydrogen that are to keep in mind, and the large amounts of funding that are coming that are new to the department that are also subject to Justice 40. Sorry, I'm just watching my time here. So in order to advance equity, we're trying to breathe this into everything that we're doing. One thing I'll highlight is that there's a lot of efforts within the agency on how we're advancing environmental justice, and a lot of these internal working groups and institutional support for advancing the work. We have communities of practice and working groups to cut across the agency to prevent siloing, share knowledge, and provide technical assistance and support for programs, many of which are led by ED, but also a lot of our program offices have really stepped up and taken a lead, Hydrogen Program Office being one of those. We're also, as an agency, taking a look at how we conduct community outreach. These are some images from our most recent Energy Justice to the People Roadshow, really meeting people where they are. We have a particular focus on the Gulf South because given that a lot of this funding will follow energy infrastructure, we know that there are disadvantaged communities there who need support in understanding what's happening, understanding the science behind the technologies that we're offering, but also understanding the efforts that the agency is doing to drive benefits to the community and to elevate community voices in our decision making. So the most important way that we're incorporating equity and environmental justice into our funding is through the use of community benefits plans. I'm going to talk generally about community benefits plans, but there are several different versions within the agency as we're rolling out this new effort. Depending on the funding source, the requirements might be slightly different depending on when the funding opportunity was announced and what requirements are in it. So I'll speak generally about community benefits plans as a concept, but if you're ever applying for any funding opportunity, the requirements for community benefits plans would be located with that funding announcement. So, but in general, for our Justice 40 covered programs, our community benefits plans have 4 priorities. Justice 40, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, good jobs, workforce, and community agreements. And so essentially, for the first time, the agency is asking project developers to consider how their project will impact each of these 4 priorities as part of the application process. And so applicants would include SMART goals for each of these 4 sections and would evaluate, and their responses will be evaluated as part of the technical merits of the application. And so for some projects, it's generally about 20% of the score. So it's a not insignificant part of the score for an application. If a project is selected, then that community benefits plan is then becomes a requirement, and it is evaluated as part of the merit review alongside all of the technical requirements of the process. And so It's for the first time elevating these benefits driven to the community to be evaluated alongside the technical attributes of the project and also be included as part of the go, no-go decisions for those projects. Everybody with me? Oh, that was my last slide. And I did it just in time because I was supposed to leave 10 minutes for questions. Are there any questions? Who's got the first question?
Hi, Tim Tessie from Mellow Power Systems.
Hi, Tim.
Wilmington, California is a disadvantaged community. It's right by the ports of LA and Long Beach. And the people there have a 17% higher asthma rate than the rest of California. We will clean up those ports, and when we do, that area is going to become some of the most expensive real estate in the United States. Those people are going to find their landlords selling their homes, and they're going to have to move inland to the desert. At least that's what I'm worried about. This is going to be repeated as we clean up these areas that before nobody wanted to live, that couldn't afford not to live there. We're going to clean those places up, and now people are going to move in and take advantage of the real estate and housing prices. We have a big problem. Can the DOE do equity alone? Do you need help from housing and urban development? Like, how does equitable sustainability not turn into just relocation and absorbing of all this previously leftover real estate?
All excellent points. I think that I'll say that one thing that definitely does keep me up at night is just the threat of displacement and gentrification. However, at the end of the day, it shouldn't stop us from doing what is right. It shouldn't stop us from, we recognize that those are issues, and of course we're an active partner in trying to ensure that we're not doing more harm as we're advancing these goals. But the Department of Energy's funding, I say our goal is to ensure that the projects that are funded by the Department of Energy are contemplating these concepts at application and not as an afterthought. And so as part of those community benefits plans, we'd hope to see that project developers have considered the out-year implications of the work that they're doing.
Is there anyone else in the federal government that's looking at this?
Everyone else in the federal government is looking at this. It is a very much whole of government approach. One of the things that I'll note about the roadshow is that we do take government partners from other agencies. So we did have, I believe, HUD and EPA along with us on our last roadshow. So we do work collaboratively with other federal agencies, and we also work on the interagency, the Environmental Justice Interagency Committee. So that includes a number of federal agencies, including HUD, EPA, Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services. So really a whole of government approach and not going it alone. And also sharing what we're learning as we go, because like I said earlier, there's lots of different federal agencies involved, some with more experience than others, and so looking for opportunities to synergize and advance and maximize the work that we're already doing.
I'm not familiar with the term energy burden and the 1% increase.
So energy burden is essentially a calculation of how much of your annual income is the cost that you spend on your energy bills. And so I believe that what's considered quote unquote normal, or the level that most states try to keep energy burden, so that's that gap that energy assistance programs address, I think it's like 3%. And so there's some communities where folks are paying upward of 10, 20% of their income just for their energy consumption, energy needs.
Hi, Derry Day with HIMAX in Las Vegas. Hi. I know these grants are designed for the Justice 40 to look at benefits. Will the grants also be evaluated whether they hurt communities? So, for example, electrolyzers will be placed in the worst communities because that's where the cheap land will be.
And so I'll say that, yes. So under Justice 40, and I was trying to go back to our Justice 40 priorities, and so one of those sections of the community benefits plan does address the impacts of a project. And so that's just contained in the Justice 40 section. I was trying to get back to the key policy priorities under Justice 40 for the agency. Here they are. And you're talking about this one, decreasing environmental exposure and burden for disadvantaged communities. And so as part of the community benefits plan for a project that might contain equipment that is emission generating equipment, you would expect that the project developer would address how this project will work to decrease the environmental exposure from that project on the community that it'll be sited in. Any more?
This slide you show the priorities. Is there? Do you in this slide right here you show the policy priorities, and they kind of give these sort of aspirational goals without any sort of quantifiable targets. Are there quantifiable targets for any of these goals that you have?
So as part of the development of a community benefit plan, the project would propose what those SMART goals would be, what the quantifiable targets are for that project.
But in more general, like, DOE-wide targets rather than project-specific quantifiable targets.
Well, I'll say DOE-wide, these are the priorities. We are still in the process of kind of quantifying and evaluating benefits. We're very, very much at the beginning stages of this, right? Projects are just now being awarded and selected and negotiating community benefits plans. And for each community benefits plan, it's going to be different. For every project, what those benefits look like are going to be different. And as part of the development and negotiation of the community benefits plan, the metrics associated with it will be included in the negotiations for that.
Quick question. Okay. I want to commend people to the work of the Green Hydrogen Organization, which is a group based in Oslo, which I'm doing volunteer work for, which is working on these same issues for the prospect of hydrogen projects in developing countries. It sounds like you guys are a lot farther away. I'm trying to send you a LinkedIn connection because I want to pick your brains, but go looking for that. It's on the web, and there's several papers that give some specificity to what exactly local benefits plans should look like in other countries, not in the U.S.
Thank you. I think there was a question over here.
I can talk about Alex. Alex Augustine with Air Liquide. I'm glad you brought up SMART goals because examples of SMART goals from the DOE would be very useful. It's hard to come up with measurable qualities around these kind of priorities.
Understandable. Like I said, we're very, very much at the beginning stages of this, and it's something new. It's the first time we're asking applicants to do that. We're providing as much guidance and support as we're allowed to. There are some things that are procurement sensitive that do make it complicated, but what we hope to see is that as projects are awarded, as some of these community benefits plans come from concept to reality, that there'll be more that we can share. We hope that that project developers are really thinking hard about how they can incorporate community benefits plans in their projects, because at the end of the day, we can't approve a community benefits plan that doesn't come to the agency. So these community benefits plans cover more than just hydrogen, right? So this is across the DOE complex. There's a lot of different types of technologies that are covered by this. And so what those benefits are might look different from project to project, but we are working to provide as much guidance as possible. If you go on our website, we do have a community benefits plan page that has some guidance and training there. I'd also encourage anyone who is not actively engaged in a project that is before the Department of Energy right now to sign up as a reviewer. We're always looking to increase our cadre of expert reviewers, and that's also an opportunity to support this work by providing good feedback on applications.
You could double click rapidly on the workforce development aspect. I don't know if I'm sure you're aware, but tomorrow there is a webinar on bridges, the Bioenergy Research and Education Bridge. And apparently it's an effort spurred by the DOE to create a bioenergy specific education curriculum. I was wondering if you could comment on such curriculum, and maybe this is a hydrogen conference. If you see a hydrogen specific curriculum new ones happening anytime soon, so that we can prepare for the workforce of tomorrow?
I have to get back to you on that. You said it's a bioengineering technology office.
Apparently, yeah.
I'll get your contact information. Cool. We're at time? All right. Thank you, everybody.